4.
Okay, here we go.
3/5. If you have 5 people here, you would need 3 people to vote to go in.
3 can go in.
3/5 of a vote.
We're going to go with the boards. Good evening. I'm going to call to order the workshop of July 16th, 2018. We are going to make a couple changes, actually one slight change to our workshop schedule. We were supposed to take a vote on going into executive session to consult on a legal issue. We're going to actually postpone that approximately 15 minutes. And we're going to reshuffle and go into Mark Hughes, Maine Revived Civility. Mark, thank you for driving all the way down here to Auburn. Appreciate it.
Actually, it's only from Poland, so.
It's up to Auburn then, and you know that's a hard commute sometimes. But thank you very much, Mark.
Hi, you're welcome.
And I wish we had more members. They should be rolling in. There seems to be some traffic coming into our great city, so they should be rolling in the next minute or two. But you do have the power trust here. You like how I said that?
Very good.
That's all Leroy and Belinda.
In the southern part of the city.
Southern part of the city. I got stuck in Gulf Hill coming here.
Well, I want to thank you, Mayor Levesque, and the rest of the City Council for putting me on your workshop agenda tonight and to give me a few minutes to talk about a project that I am involved with called Maine Revived Civility.
Mark, if you could just hold on 1 second. I do appreciate you standing up and everything. I want to get, Brian, if you can get a remote microphone so people at home can hear as well.
Okay.
That way we get good audio.
We're doing this on tape, so we need a mic.
Yeah, you're live. 10 million viewers, plus or minus.
Right.
Thank you, Mark, and I'm sorry about the interruption. Continue.
Oh, that's fine. That's fine. Not a problem at all. I know we had to kind of reshuffle a little bit.
Go,
So,
please.
am I all set now?
You're good to go.
All right, good. The National Institute for Civil Discourse has been around for about 7 years. It's based at the University of Arizona, and during that time, they've been involved with education and training at the national and state levels with our elected officials. About a year ago, they decided that they wanted to then start something at the grassroots level to get down to the community level. And so they launched the Revive Civility Initiative. Maine is one of 4 states that is piloting the initiative. Ohio, Iowa, and Arizona are the other 3 states. And so what we're really promoting is better conversations. And if we do that, then our democracy depends on conversations. So in the sense that we have a right to vote, and that is a fundamental right that we also have the opportunity and the right to be able to talk to each other, to express our views, to have a dialogue about the issues, and we've got a situation where the quality of that conversation matters. And obviously people are listening. So, what have they found? NICD has partnered with national polling firms, and they've found that for many of us, there is a feeling that civility is in crisis. Weber Sandwick is a polling company. They do a Civility in America poll every year. This year, the results were that 93% of those polled believe that there is a civility problem. 83% believe that incivility leads to intolerance of free speech. And so that is significant. The American Psychological Association also does polling around stress in America. And what they found this year is the top 4 stressors for people were the future of our country, money, workplace, and current political climate. I think we can understand in particular where money and workplace come in. But the important thing about this and the interesting thing about this is that the future of the country, this is the first year that that's topped the list of stressors for people. And more importantly, basically half of us now believe that this is our lowest point in our nation's history. So, what can we do about it? Well, we're asking people to choose civility. And it's not just a matter of being nice or being polite to each other. It's more about civil discourse. It is an understanding that we have the ability to carry on in free and respectful exchange of ideas, that we can debate our ideas, that we can have constructive criticism about our ideas, but all in the way of doing it in an affirming way that shows respect for each other. It is, in fact, the ability to disagree without being disagreeable. So what have we got available to us? Well, what I'm here to present tonight for the city is an opportunity to work with 4 different types of conversations that NICD has created guides for. The first is one-on-one. It uses a guide as well as a series of videos available through YouTube that help people move through a conversation. Primarily, if we can, find somebody that you wouldn't normally talk to, and in the process, hopefully develop some unlikely friendships. The second is small group dialogue. It's a little more intimate. It involves 6 to 8 people. It is a guided conversation, but again, it brings a diversity of views to the table, and it allows people to be able to get to know each other a little better. Large-scale conversation, that's a community level, city level. It is about getting a large group of people together, and it is professionally facilitated and offers the opportunity for people to start hearing from their neighbors and to develop relationships. And finally, in your packet, you'll have a little business card on Text Talk Revive Civility. It is NICD's kind of unique way of fostering conversations. It's a text-based platform. You text a server, you gather 2 or 3 friends, and it launches a conversation. The beauty of it is in its simplicity. It can be done pretty much anywhere, anytime. You don't need to organize a formal meeting. You don't need to try to corral people to attend. It's when you're ready at the dinner table, out with friends, if you have time to be able to have that conversation. So how are we organized in Maine? We're basically organized along 3 things. First, a pledge. People take an individual pledge to restore or revive civility in their daily lives and in their personal encounters. Once you take a pledge, you have a pledge card in front of you. Then it's about engaging others to lead with civility. And again, remember, I was talking about civil discourse. It's not, when we say lead with civility, it's not just about being polite or nice. And then from there, we organize one of those 4 types of community conversations that I talked about. So how do we get started? Very simply, sign the pledge. If you're interested and willing, take that pledge tonight, tomorrow. You can do it online through revivecivility.org, and then figure out what kind of conversation you'd like to hold. And I am available as a resource to the city to be able to organize those conversations. Again, I said that they are guided conversations, so they allow people to have these kinds of conversations in a little bit more safe situation. And then just reach out, to be able to reach out and connect with people across divisions, across divides, but also to each other. And if we do that, then we have the opportunity to have meaningful conversations that can make a difference, that can actually change things. So with that, I am done, and if you would like, I can answer any questions. More importantly, please take a look and take an opportunity to look at the materials. I would like to encourage you or to suggest that we have a next step in terms of figuring out if the city would like to hold some conversations, how they would like to organize those. You know, we can do it, promote one-on-one conversations and just let people do it on their own. We can organize small group dialogues, and if you want to lead to a large-scale conversation. So.
Very good. Thank you very much, Mr. Hughes, for your time. Council, I think we all have packets of information here. If we do have some extra, if we could leave them on the table, just so members of the public can look and see what we've been kind of nose down deep in.
Sure.
But thank you. Councilor Fournier?
I just have one question. A few months ago, we had a presentation here from the Green Dot people. I don't know if you're familiar with Green Dot. Are you connected at all with them?
No. No. but I am familiar with them, and I've been to a meeting where they were at. This is meant to complement, if there's already existing efforts going on, we can certainly complement those efforts. The resources are available to anybody who wants to download them from revivecivility.org. Doesn't necessarily require me to help organize that, although that's what I'm here to do. I'm here to, and available to do that. But I've already worked with a number of organizations where they've already started something or they already have something, and we simply plug in the resources that make the most sense.
I think plugging in makes sense. How long has this initiative been going on?
So we launched officially in Maine in October of 17. So, and right now we're through to the end of this year with the opportunity and the hope that we'll be able to continue.
Thank you.
Yeah, you're welcome.
Very good.
Question, AARP, are you related in any way with them?
Well,
AARP?
Yeah, as a matter of fact, it's good that you asked that question. I'm actually meeting with them tomorrow, and we're looking at coordinating. I was at one of their breakfast events last Friday in Bangor, and we're looking at coordinating and being at more of those events, and then partnering with AARP to disseminate our information.
Because I was going to say, they have a program similar to what you're talking about here.
Yep, so, and that's what we're meeting about tomorrow.
Thank
you. How to coordinate that, yeah.
Sounds like there's a need for this right now, since we have not one, two, but three, at least three initiatives going on that we know of. And, you know, I, for one, feel like I watch news every day. My TV is Forensic Files and all of the news stations.
Right.
So that's my life, but I just continue to be absolutely shocked with what I see, and I really would like to see us return to being a kinder, gentler society.
Yep.
And I'll do anything I can to help promote any initiative that supports that.
Thank you. And I would add to that, that yes, we want to get there as well, but more importantly, the resources that are available, when we talk about civil discourse, what we're really talking about is being able to arrive and have conversations that find solutions to the issues that we face. So it's not just about having a conversation for the sake of having a conversation. This leads somewhere.
Changing mindsets.
Yep.
Good thing we don't have any problems in Auburn. But funny anecdote, researching our 150-year anniversary is my plug for the sesquicentennial. 100 and some odd years ago, when it was being decided upon where the county seat for Androscoggin County was going to be, there was a large meeting of delegates from all the municipalities. And after threatening life and limb by someone, a founding father of Auburn, to a delegation from Turner, he just threw a wad of cash on the table and bought their votes. So this stuff's been going on for well over 150 years. Pretty interesting. Mr. Hughes, thank you very much for your time. Appreciate it.
Thank you. I appreciate your time.
Turner, every little brutal day. We're going to go back into our schedule now. We have an executive session to consult with legal counsel regarding the opioid lawsuit by the city pursuant to 1 MRS Section 405. Do I have a motion?
Motion to go into it.
Motion from Councilor Walker. Do I have a second?
Second, please.
Second from Councilor Fournier. All those in favor, please raise your hand. Opposed? Abstain? None. We'll now enter into executive session. Very good.
They're on.
I declare council out of executive session. Next on the agenda, and thank you very much, everybody here, for your patience. Agricultural study update. Our co-chairs, Mary Sylvester and David Haynes, is along with Eric Cousins from city staff. If you could please come up. We're looking forward to your presentation.
Thank you.
Good evening.
Good evening. We're really delighted to be here. We began what was, in fact, a series of engaging and very civil but not simple conversations at the request of council. Last fall, we were appointed by council and the mayor at that time to support the work of a consultant that the city hired to support the study of the Auburn agricultural and resource sector. And as we move forward, before we get any further, I want to make sure you have a chance to meet all of the members of our committee who are able to be here this evening. At the first meeting, I had the fortune, I believe, of being elected chair. My partner here was elected vice chair. David, would you like to introduce yourself?
I know many of you. I'm David Haynes. I live on the Butler Hill Road in Butler Hill Historic Farm.
And for the other members of our committee who are here, I wonder if you'd be willing to stand, wave your hand around, and introduce yourselves. We'll start over here with Dave and Karen.
Dave Bell, Brookside Drive.
Kind of going around, those of you who are on the committee, you know who they are. And there are many other, what we would call friends of the committee who came to every meeting. And we engaged them in the full conversation at each of those meetings.
And if I could, it's an appropriate time. Thank you very much. On behalf of the entire city council and city staff, we've been participating either actively or passively in your meetings. We'd just like to thank everybody who participated. Thank you very much. This is a long process. This is true volunteerism to make your community better, and it does not go unnoticed and underappreciated. So thank you very much. If we forget to say this at the end of your presentation, we appreciate all the hard work done by everybody.
On behalf of us all, I say you're welcome. We worked hard. We met 9 times. So you see there the list of our committee members. I'd like to just do the slide that refreshes our memory of the purpose of the committee. We were established to be in an advisory role during the length of the contract term with Crossroads Resource Center, the consultant. And we met with the consultant several times during his, and in fact, Megan's work, Ken and Megan's work. And we met ourselves without the consultant many times afterwards to work through the recommendations that the consultant was bringing forward, grapple with the data book. Many of you, I think, if not all of you, were at each of the consultants' presentations in February. And to debate vigorously often how we thought the recommendations would work for Auburn. If we learned anything, we learned that this is complicated and that it is very difficult to move as fast as some, if not all of us, would have wished. However, we are committed to the importance of this work, recognizing that agricultural sector is an important part of the heritage of our community, and in fact that this zone represents nearly 40% of the landmass. Eric, if you would jump to the next slide. We adopted the concept of working through differences to the point of consensus. And that requires a lot of important conversation and good listening and clarity of discussion. And we did that, and I'm very proud of our committee for how we worked. We have several recommendations. One is that we recommend that this be adopted as a statement of values that the city values our agricultural heritage and the protection of the natural beauty of our land, that we promote locally grown food, raising livestock, managing forests, and natural resource-based businesses. So this is indeed one of our recommendations to you, but we have more. Working with the consultants, and often guided by them, but not limited by them, we recommend these priorities. We believe that it is important to protect open space in the rural landscape. We believe that it is essential to strengthen the agricultural and natural resource sector of our community, and believe that there's real opportunity to do that. We unanimously agreed that the 50% income rule must be changed. However, we grappled with how difficult it is to find a guideline that could replace it that would not create an unintended consequence. So we did not resolve that question because we think it needs more work before it is wholesale discarded with an alternative in place. We learned more from the consultant and those amongst us on the committee about the importance of infrastructure investments and incentives that are needed to support the agricultural sector, and that there's work to be done to understand the best incentives that would be available and successful for today and the economy and the future. We believe it is important to protect farmland for agricultural uses and to foster productive use of these lands, and that part of the key is going to be holding the price of working agricultural land low. We agreed that we need to continue to educate the community about the contribution of agriculture, and noted that even amongst us, some of us did not know as much as we needed to about the importance of the agricultural contribution to our economy and community, and that it is important to protect the natural environment with a special emphasis on Lake Auburn. I'm going to pass the baton in a moment, but I would like to, before David picks up here, give a special shout out to Eric Cousins, who really did a magnificent job in supporting our committee, and all of the work that you will see in this study and embedded in our recommendations and the consultants' work would not have been possible without Eric's really tremendous contribution. So thanks a lot to you.
Thank you
Very much. David, I pass the mic to you.
Yes, I won't say much about the content of the report. You'll hear plenty of that from Eric and a little more from Mary, maybe more from me later. I'd just like to compliment the council on appointing this committee. And I didn't realize when I became involved the amount of agricultural activity going on in Auburn itself. I got to meet an awful lot of people I hadn't met before. I got to see a great amount of enthusiasm for local foods. Our committee meetings were lively. We had plenty of things to talk about, almost too much, and that's why we've landed where we are. We realize we have much more. Auburn has much more to talk about. But I just want to compliment all the participants, especially Eric and the staff in the city, and Manager Crichton also, who attended many of the meetings, and many of the counselors as well, which shows how important an issue this is for the city of Auburn. We have some good momentum going. We've got a lot of people. We had an incredible number of volunteers coming to our meetings as well. There were 10 of us appointed, but there were at least 10 or 15 other people who just kind of showed up and expressed interest. So it's a big issue. It hasn't been talked about enough in Auburn. The purpose of this report is to bring it forward and start talking more with all the really good energy that's been generated by this commission, particularly Mary's leadership. Thank you, Mary.
Thank you, Mary and David. We started by splitting up the work of the consultant and the committee. The committee's responsibility, as Mary touched on, was to work with and advise the consultant. We had 9 meetings of the committee to identify and consider issues and solutions. A couple of those meetings were public meetings that I'll get to in a second. The rest were all open to the public, but they weren't specifically for the purpose of gathering public input, although we had a number of members of the public that were at almost every meeting. The committee also worked to identify challenges and opportunities, both from their personal experiences, but also by talking amongst community members that were involved in farming or interested in rural land use in Auburn, and bringing those issues back to the committee. In the end, we're here tonight to offer a final report to the council. We have unanimous agreement among the committee members on a few of the key points on that, and there's still some work to be done. The consultant provided a real in-depth baseline of the economic, policy, and social context of Auburn's agricultural and resource sector, using as much local data as they could find, but also a lot of it was regional or by county here in Maine. They reviewed surveys that were completed a little over a year ago, but they also interviewed 50-plus stakeholders, and you'll see that in the report, the list of people that were interviewed that have an interest in either food production or agriculture or rural lands here in Auburn and potentially beyond Auburn throughout the region. They compiled relevant data and best practices. We have an amazing amount of information on the city's website. One of the things that the committee has asked is that we maintain that website going forward as a resource. We've added to it continuously during the term of the study, and we intend to continue to add to it and maintain it going forward for the work of hopefully an eventual commission or whatever the next steps are that the council wants for working on these issues. We had a meeting on February 1st. That was a presentation of all of that data, public presentation, well attended here in this room. And then on the 15th, we had a presentation that went beyond the data and really framed some recommendations of the really nationally recognized consultant on best practices elsewhere and things that they thought might be useful in resolving some of the concerns that were raised through the committee discussions. I mentioned the website. You can see it here at the top left on this list. We have a substantial amount of information and historic documents, the history of the agricultural zone, changes that have been made over time, best practices from other places. There's a lot of information on that, including details on some of the interviews and things like that. So I encourage you, anybody with an interest in these agricultural lands and ag economy in Auburn, take a look at that, and there's a lot there to familiarize yourself with some of the work that the committee had done to identify what there were for opportunities and some surprising information. There is the Auburn, Maine Local Economy, Agriculture, Forestry, and Housing Data Book. That's the report from the consultant, and the consultant recommendations as well on that site. I want to move on to from the data and reports to what I called in the presentation important realizations. I think maybe many of the committee members and people involved already realize some of these things. Some of them may seem simple, but they're important concepts that I think came out during the discussion that need to be considered as we go forward. The Ag Zone, Agricultural Zoning District, covers about 40% of the land in Auburn. That's a substantial land mass for any city, but Auburn being about 67 square miles, including the lakes, that's a lot of land. It's a substantial resource for the community. We talked about the conversion of land, and one of the concepts was reversible versus permanent. If you convert, like Whitehome Farm Plaza would be an example of where Walmart is. That was once farmland. It's been converted to another use, but it's been converted to a use that really can't be reversed easily. There are some other uses of farmland, perhaps solar panels or things like that, that could be converted to a new use and then still have the potential to go back to agriculture someday if the market changes or the needs of the community change. One of the surprising facts, it was surprising for me and I think for other committee membership, was that 74% of the nearly 20,000 acres in the Ag Zone is actually forested. So it's not actively used for agriculture. It may be used for timber harvesting or other forestry uses. It may be used for hiking or open space or foraging. It may be used for a lot of different things, but not actively used for agriculture. But forestry is an important component of our natural resource-based economy here in Auburn. Restrictive zoning limits value in taxes. This one I wanted to think about a little bit while we talk through it. Is we really are trying to grow value here in Auburn, and this is a dilemma that the ag zone in particular, I think people need to wrestle with as we look at changes, is the restrictive zoning limits the value of the ag zone, but that also limits the tax liability of people that are holding large pieces of land in the ag zone. And the large pieces of land that are used for forestry or agriculture don't generate the demand for much services either. So there's they're cheap to provide services to, but they're also the low tax burden allows people to hold those lands for longer. If Auburn wants to limit growth in certain areas, it allows for sort of a public-private ability to do that. This continues the realizations. Agriculture requires infrastructure and markets. You can grow the best tomatoes in Maine, but if you don't have a place to sell them, store them, or process them, you can't get them to market and turn them into an income stream. That was something that came out of, I think, David Bell was able to explain that very well, how the markets work for his industry. Wide range of existing activities. There's a lot of industry or business here in Auburn that revolves around the natural resource-based economy. Agriculture is the one that comes to people's minds first, with the zoning district name quite often. Forestry, again, is an important component. We have a few composting operations here in Auburn. Mining, gravel pits, blasting ledge to make material, aggregate for concrete. We have substantial gravel operations here in Auburn. Recreation and open space, whether that's the primary use of the land, like some of the city parks, like Mount Appetite, or a lot of the forestry land and agricultural land allows for people to use it recreationally, even though it's privately owned. The Ag Resource Protection Zone separates incompatible uses. I can remember a former coworker that always would try to reinforce this with me, that the agricultural zone is a natural resource-based industrial zone. There's only 2 zones in Auburn that don't allow housing unless they're accessory to a primary use, and that's the industrial zone and the ag zone. And the ag zone does a good job of providing a space for uses that are loud or dusty or dirty or smelly. Agriculture can be all of those things, as well as some of the other uses. There needs to be careful thought given to changes to our zoning. This was something that the committee discussed. There wasn't a simple answer. Everybody could seem to agree that the 50% income rule for a house may be antiquated, but it's not simple to come up with an alternatives, and I think the alternatives are really going to depend on what the goals of the city are. And then there are often competing policies, as noted here, that you'll probably be trading off one goal for another goal to find some middle ground that meets the needs of the majority of people that are concerned about the issues. There really should be careful consideration with an eye to long-term consequences and fairness, was the way that it was drawn. We'll move to primary recommendations, and I think David will pick up here.
Yeah, our primary recommendation, which we all enthusiastically supported and voted for unanimously, is that the City Council create a permanent committee on implementations of agricultural, forestry, resource protection initiatives similar to agricultural commissions formed in other communities in Maine and nationwide. We were surprised to find, well, we learned a lot of things, and one of them is that many towns already have agricultural commissions. And the role of that commission can range very widely, but it's a voice for agriculture or for the agricultural businesses. So our recommendation is to create, that the city create this permanent committee that would provide advice to the city council on policy development. And the members of the committee, we would hope, would be actually people who are very much involved in agriculture or forestry, but know the business, know the land, and have a lot of advice to give to the city. Up until this point, one of the things that we found, which doesn't surprise you, is that many of the agricultural people had trouble with the city. Not because the city was not supporting agriculture, but we've just never sat down and thought about the effects of building codes and zoning on specifically agriculture. And so this committee would do that, and it would, we don't have a specific charge other than what's listed up there, but we put that in the hands of the committee. The second primary recommendation, which is the elimination of the 50% income rule. As you know, you can't build an additional residential home in the agricultural zone unless you can assure that 50% of your income comes from your agricultural business. It's a difficult piece of the code to enforce anyway, and it does need to be replaced. The only question is replace it with what? And that's going to take a lot of thought. Our consultants gave us several alternatives which have been, which are in the report, of different ways to do this, say counting the amount of food that's produced on a farm, requiring a certain level of food production or a certain level of income or proof of income. It gets pretty complicated pretty fast, and I think it's the farmers that should be the ones that would be closely involved in any changes that we recommend to the council. Thank you.
Speaking of farmers being involved, several of us went to some of the different conferences that have been held in Maine on agriculture and agricultural initiatives, and they were all impressed that people who are active farmers were on our committee, because in many communities, farmers want to have a voice but don't have a chance to contribute their time. And we had a number of people who earn their living and are actively farmers who gave up a lot of time to be on our committee. So I want a special thank you to them. And Eric, you can wrap up our presentation.
Thank you. So the recommended commission would be a permanent commission, and they would have a lot of work to do still after the work of the committee. The committee identified a number of priorities, which I'll go through here. One, we've talked about the 50% income standard replacement. Not sure what yet, but it's going to require some careful thought from people that are involved in agriculture in order to come up with something that still promotes those goals. Agricultural incentives, there are not many, if any, local incentives currently for agriculture, other than maybe the low cost of land in our agricultural zone. But one option that is new within the past few years, and only one community so far in the state has used it, in Winslow, is the Voluntary Municipal Farm Support Program. That would allow, should the commission and the council really has the ultimate decision, should the council want to, it would allow some tax benefits for new farm buildings as well as land. We have some programs that cover agricultural lands that are currently in agricultural use currently, but we've never had an ability to cover buildings for agriculture. But there is a way to do that now, and that's something we could explore if the council is interested. It works similar to other programs, like a TIF program that could rebate taxes, but it would be very specific to promoting municipal goals surrounding agricultural land use in a particular area. 10-acre minimum lot size, that has existed for a long time in the agricultural zone. Some of the ideas discussed by the committee include some ability to potentially cluster housing and try to focus, if there is to be some lands released from the agricultural zone, that the idea would be to focus any non-agricultural development in areas that were not suitable for agriculture for some reason to begin with. If that was done, the 10-acre minimum lot size really eats up a lot of land quickly for individual house lots, and maybe a smaller lot size for something like that would be a better option to allow it to be concentrated in areas that were not as suitable for agriculture. Residential strip depth in rural areas. A lot of our rural roads in Auburn have a 450-foot deep residential strip along the roads, and then the backland is agricultural. The committee had concerns with that and thought that should be looked at as to whether or not the 450 feet is the right depth. We had deeper strips in the past for a few years, and we saw some rural subdivisions developing, and the council at that time and planning board chose to reduce them to 450. But it's worth taking a look at again and measuring those options against current priorities. Educate the community about agriculture. We would have a group of citizens that are involved. The report details the qualifications, but are involved in agriculture, as well as potentially non-residents that are experts in agriculture or policy on a committee that could really work to educate the community about agriculture. And then to continue through the consultant recommendations after these priority areas were addressed to work through those with the commission. We did have some overlap. You can see the list to the right on things that the comprehensive plan had already suggested that we look at. The top one is flexibility in home location in the ag and residential split zone lots, so those lots with a residential strip along the front that already have the ability to build a home in the front. The comp plan recommended that we look at maybe some process to give them flexibility into where on the lot they build, even if it's still just a single house lot that they could already build up near the road. Agricultural related business, to be flexible in related businesses like farm stands or processing facilities. The committee saw that as a way to allow for additional infrastructure around agriculture and hopefully to make existing operations or new ones more successful. The reuse of existing agricultural buildings for non-agricultural related uses when they can no longer be used for agriculture for a variety of reasons. The comp plan suggested that we look at other options. And then the comp plan's recommendation was that residential uses should continue to be limited to accessory as part of commercial agriculture. That's still part of the comp plan. The committee looked at a lot of different options that might allow even some flexibility in housing that still support agriculture in some way. And lastly, just wanted to note at the Chamber of Commerce event earlier this year, the committee and the city of Auburn were recognized as working towards one of the Good Food Council's goals, in particular for living by example. The fourth principle of the Good Food Council, Lewiston-Auburn Community Food Charter, is to elevate good food policy by engaging and informing our local officials and leaders, lifting up examples of what works in other places, and using the definition of good food to evaluate relevant legislation and policy decisions. And in particular, the purpose statement that the committee had arrived at was recognized at that event. With that, I think we'd be happy to answer any questions.
Again, thank you. We all, just council and the public, we all have the information. And there's some great data points in here too. And I always look at, and I want to kind of preface the Q&A a little bit here with data, knowledge, and wisdom. We have a ton of data. We have some knowledge that came out of the committee. We're lacking in depth of wisdom and actionable items. And I think we have one of two directions to go in as a council, is to take the data that we have, some of the knowledge, seek more knowledge, and create the wisdom and the actionable items ourselves, or diffuse that responsibility out to another subgroup to do these initial first steps. That's really what I think it boils down to. I'll give you my preference. I think as an elected body of representatives, we owe it to the city of Auburn to represent all of Auburn, agriculture component, the agricultural economy, as well as You know, my mom, who's a taxpayer on Chicoine Avenue, who has a small little flower garden, but she is a taxpayer, as we all are. So I think it's about balance. So I'll leave it with that. I do have some questions, but I'm going to save it to the end. I'm going to open it up to the council now for some questions. If we need any clarification, Councilor Gary?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Eric, when you had talked about incentives, and you were talking about buildings, would that also include equipment that a person that wants to do farming would like to purchase?
From what I've read, I don't think there's a mechanism to include equipment, but one of the examples that we had during the discussion was if there's a particular farmer that wants to build a substantial building, $400,000 or $500,000 building, or David Bell's example, who's already invested substantially in infrastructure. If one of those farms were able to get some of the new tax burden that's on them because of their investment back on the building, they could reinvest that in equipment. So that may be an option. I don't know for sure if there's personal property tax on equipment for agriculture and whether or not that could be part of the incentive program, but we can get an answer on that.
Thank you.
Questions? Councilor Fournier?
I'm a strong proponent of the agricultural initiative, and I come from a family of apple orchardists, and we also diversified by planting crop, to sell, and David Bell was involved in purchasing our family orchard and now grows vegetables there, and he's done it in a very nice way and hasn't ruined the property, and it's still very aesthetically pleasing. So I have a question about the little piece that you mentioned, Eric, that you mentioned about, when a property is no longer able to be used for farming, being able to think of other alternatives, for that property with buildings, various buildings, et cetera. What do you have in mind? What are some possibilities for what can happen? Because I'm a little concerned about where that goes, and to maintain the integrity of the farmland and the agricultural piece.
I think that's something that the new commission potentially, the planning board and the council would have to work through. In a lot of other places, they become storage buildings for boats and snowmobiles, seasonal storage. There are other options, wedding venues potentially, or event centers. Those could be options. But I think you'd have to carefully consider those so you don't have the impacts that you're trying to avoid.
Right. I mean, my concern is, mass building and loss of land, and everybody's on top of everyone else. I mean, when you take a look at our percentage of agricultural property, that's pretty impressive for a city. And so that's the balance.
Is it impressive or is it restrictive? And just
No,
to
I
throw
don't
that
think
out there, I think about 45% of our land is at a lower tax rate. Eric, theoretically, if that land was not agriculture but it was rural residential, let's say, what would the difference in property tax income to the city of Auburn be? Is there even, to venture a guess? And I think it's important to have benchmarks, too.
I couldn't. I know that if you were allowed to build a house, the initial value of each parcel would be increased by some amount because of the ability to build a house. It would depend on how fast people split it, how much tax revenue, and how many lots were created, that kind of thing.
But if just the land itself was just 74% timbered, just like it is now, forested, but it just was zoned for the potential to be rural residential versus ag, would there be a differential in property tax income on that land?
We could try to estimate that. I don't know the number off the top of my head. We could try to estimate.
Is there a difference in property tax? If I have 100 acres that's rural residential right now that's forested?
Yes. There's a difference in value.
There is a difference in value?
There is a difference in value.
And that's, I think, it needs to be clear. We mentioned it a couple times, but I needed to know if there was a difference.
It's an important concept because you have some property owners that would feel harmed by that change and others that would be glad to take advantage of the opportunity to build the house. It'd be mixed opinions.
Yeah, okay, very good. Thank you. Questions?
I guess I, for one, would support a permitting committee because I think this is a big issue. It takes a lot of knowledge, as we've heard. And I think we need people involved that are in agriculture or have a background in the use of land and so forth. I think it's important to have continuity. I think that's why we have a planning board that kind of understands the plans that come before them, understands the zoning that they're working with, et cetera. I think the same principle applies here. So I see the need for this committee, and again, it's continuity, it's to have a historical perspective over time, so I'd support that. You know, I go to, I think page, or on our screen, it's 25. And it's table 5, median cost of community service provided per dollar of tax revenue raised. And if we look at that, you know, one reason I think that we have the agricultural zone from a historical is that we've grown concentrically out from a center. We haven't stretched our infrastructure beyond what we can support. So we try to grow from within and grow outward in concentric circles. You know, this table 5 suggests that it costs us $1.16 for every dollar that we get from, you know, tax revenue for residential support. You know, agricultural 37 cents, business, commercial, industrial 30 cents. So I think that we have to be careful. You know, I think that we have tried to have growth, but do it in a prudent manner so that we're not overextending ourselves when it comes to infrastructure support.
Any other comments, Councilor Gary?
Thank
questions?
you, Mr. Mayor. Yes, I too support the concept of forming this committee, a permanent committee, because I agree with Councilor Hayes. We need to have a board that understands the issues and is mindful of what we're trying to do. We're trying to preserve the ag for future. And we're also, right now there's a growing need to try to find ways to encourage farming and agriculture. And right now, all the land is landlocked. There's a lot of budding farmers out there that's looking for land, not huge pieces of land, but enough that they can have a home, have some animals, produce food, produce crops, do some sort of, maybe something as simple as raising bees. But we're landlocked and can't do it. If this commission can mindfully figure ways to open up some of this forest land to do it, I'm all for it.
Let's, we do obviously need to have some action. I'm going to propose, you know, and do a quick straw vote on this. I think whatever we do is going to need further thought process. Obviously the commission, which I'm not opposed to, but we wonder about how we have to balance everybody, not just our agricultural component, but also the 95% of the taxpayers in Auburn that don't make their money with agriculture. There has to be a balance. We also have to address, I think, the fact that 74% of the land is forested. How do you get that unforested? I think this is one question I have. If someone, either one of you three know or someone from the audience, how much land did we have in our ag zones that was unforested 100 years ago or 150 years ago? I know I've walked through many trails in Auburn, and you run across a stone wall, and you know that was pasture land at one point. What was the percentage? I mean, even rough. I mean, how do we get back to that arable land, if you would?
I'm not sure that's what we're really proposing, that all the currently forested land has to somehow be reclaimed back into pasture. It's really trying to understand the agricultural economy of the 21st century, which is going to look a lot different than the agricultural economy of the 20th, let alone the 19th, and to understand the niche markets that are, and I think our consultant, when you read deeply into Crossroads' report, they're really looking at where the future of agriculture is going and what are the land requirements for that. And it's so there is a lot of complexity to how you build an agricultural economic sector for the future. And the reason why we strongly encourage the formation of a committee is that these are not issues that are going to get solved by even hardworking group of our committee that met 9 times. We have, I think one of the slides showed, we have the consultants' work as a work plan. You all invested a lot of really important resources to hire one of the most nationally known agricultural economists in the country. He works, as you went to our meetings, he works all over the country. He sees real opportunities for our sector right here in Auburn, Maine. That does not mean that all the currently forested land has to be cleared. It's really understanding that sector and building out the agricultural economy in the markets that lie ahead. And understanding that as a council and mayor, you are dedicated to economic development in this community. We're really suggesting that this is one of those niche sector markets that deserves specialized attention. And we recognize that many of us, and I'll count myself among them, thought I knew more about it than I did. And coming into this, we learned that there are people who are the farmers among us who already knew it, but there's a lot more to be learned about this. And we believe that, as did the consultant, that there's a real opportunity for Auburn to make a mark here in New England. I've heard many of you speak about how we will position ourselves for success in New England, if not the world. But let's start.
At least North America.
First, okay.
Well, North America.
But we believe that we have an opportunity to do this. And in fact, when we were at some of these meetings, people came up to us and were excited to see people from Auburn at the meetings and said, "You are really fortunate. Now you need to be careful what you do." And that's not to say that the current zoning regs are exactly the right ones. They're pretty quick to say we've done a better job of preserving farmland than we have
Promoting
farms.
farming.
But that the opportunities are there for us to be positioned for real success, since food is going to be an important sector of the future. So, end of passionate appeal, but we think it's an economic development opportunity that deserves and merits a deeper dive.
Fair enough. I think this, again, data is important. Councilor Young?
Yes, we have the agricultural land. It might be forest, it might be pastures, but there are a lot of people are trying to get into farming.
Yep.
And we have the land.
You do.
As a resource. The bottom of your pyramid, economic pyramid, is either farming or industry, and it goes up to the top. I think we're in a pretty good position, and we probably need this committee to give us some knowledge that we don't all have. I have an acre more or less, but it just grows up in grass when I don't mow. So I have a field next to my house.
I think it's growing that fast right now. So let's look at this. I think if we're going to have a good conversation about economic development in the city, we need to have a holistic approach or a holistic conversation about economic development, which would include agriculture, light industry, the rest of the pyramid, Councilor Young, and what we have for assets and lay it on the table before we can smartly look at, the next steps. I'd like to propose that we instruct the city manager to start setting forth a series of conversations about ag, about zoning, about lands, so we can get a lot more public input and to take this public feedback on the road to get out to the neighborhoods and talk to people. And I do respect the work that the committee has put forth, but the amount of recommendations on solving some issues that we've heard from the public is wanting. For example, house lots under 1 acre. I had a call a couple of weeks ago from a landowner that has a few acres of land in ag land, wants to build a retirement home. Can't farm it, it's clay and shrub, but he can't. He can't build right now, and he wants to add to the economy. I've heard this a couple times. We have to take into consideration those folks, and we have to look at some of these issues, I think, because it's warranted. But again, we have to look at the competing interests of all of Auburn. And that's what, I'll be honest with you, it concerns me when we have specific committees charged with power and insight on one section of the economy, because then it opens the door to every other section of, or sector of the economy. Is next going to be, you know, a special committee to take into account everything that has to do with light manufacturing or any other sector, you know? And I do get concerned about that. I do think that we deserve, and the city of Auburn deserves, a little bit more time in having those conversations and see how all the pieces of the puzzle kind of fit together. Thoughts?
I guess I do. I think there's a certain amount of momentum that's built up. I think that, you know, we could create this committee to, you know, take forth the information. We as a council need to take information in from all various groups. I think that we're going to burden ourselves if we think we're going to now take over this project with all the other projects that are before us. So I think that the more people that we have involved in assisting us to gather information, present ideas, and flush those ideas out, the better. As a council, we're not going to give justice within our terms to do what needs to be done. There's a need for participation of the community, yes, and I think the best way to do that is through committees. And not that they have authority to make decisions, but they can bring forth ideas for the council, the sitting council now, but future councils.
Well, we have the committee in place. It has not been disbanded, per se. It has no authority to make rules, but it has the authority to bring forth ideas. And I agree. You know, subject matter expertise is important in all of this in order to gain that. And I think having a formalized committee to do that with yet to be determined or promised, you know, authority in the future, because it's too early to give that, because we just don't know. I will say, though, this committee has been meeting, with all due respect, for many, many months. And what we have is what we have. And I'm not sure if we should expect consensus on further activities with the same committee, or if should we form a new committee and not search for consensus, but search for majority. And there's a difference, because you were consensus at 100% agreement on certain aspects or on multiple issues, but you could only come to 100% consensus on these points that you presented tonight. Am I wrong on that?
I'd like to say something about the value of the process we used. We met 5 times after the consultant's report was received. We were not about to begin a deep dive into policy issues before the consultant's recommendations, and those were not presented to us till the 1st of March. And we met 5 times after that. And yes, we did use a consensus process, and we did so because you build better learning when you're sure you're listening to everyone on complicated matters and don't rush too fast for an up-down vote on complex matters while they're still being discussed. And I will say, as a chair, I am a deep believer in the social capital that we generate by working through towards consensus so that we can learn from each other. And we learned from each other. And in 5 meetings, should we have done more? 5 meetings after a consultant's report? I would suggest that had we rushed forward with anything further, you would not have had a well-educated committee. And I would not stand with any pride behind rushed decisions after 5 meetings. You have a consultant's report. I hope you've all read it. Mm-hmm. I have had times in which I think I was dreaming about it. It's in depth. There are very concrete recommendations from the consultant. That's what the city of Auburn hired. It was not our job as a committee to overrule the consultant. You paid for that and you got the best. And we, as you saw in our recommendation, believe that the committee should use it, the permanent committee should use it as a work plan. That's why you paid for it, I hope. I'm going to speak now as a taxpayer. We paid for a study that has recommendations. Why would we not study them well enough to know how to implement them? He sees real opportunity here. We'd like to suggest that our city continue to use those recommendations and develop them into policy recommendations for you as council, which is in your purview, not ours. But if you are suggesting, with all due respect, that we should have done more in the 5 meetings after the consultant's report than we did, I would suggest that that's not really the way we're going to get a quality product of decision-making in our city, and we weren't prepared to do that.
And just to be clear, I don't think that was our recommendation. We were just seeing what other ideas might have come up that would have gained, if not consensus, majority support on some of those recommendations to give us a little bit of a different guideline.
You could perhaps find a chair who would have used a different model than consensus building, but I'm a believer in consensus building, and anything I'm ever part of strives to do the work of building consensus because I think it serves the community well.
And thank you for that. And it's just different approaches and just different insights. So moving forward, should we start looking and increasing the number of workshop items that are kind of focused on this topic, keeping the committee or alive in its current format, or forming a new advisory committee, which we can absolutely do? Thoughts?
I think that this current committee has done a lot of homework. Your meetings have been thorough, they've been very well run, and I think you've followed the advice of the consultants. You know, perhaps maybe if we're anticipating like a wider range of items in terms of the agricultural area, then you may want to include a few additional members with a different point of view. I, for one, am not ready to get rid of the forest. I remember the day that I saw the forest go down for the ball. I cried and cried and cried. I used to jog there. I used to bring my babies in their carriages around there. I believe we need to keep a lot of forest as property, and I want the animals to be able to live here just like us. So as far as I'm concerned, yes, there are many demands for that property, the agricultural zone, and I think that we need to carefully build upon the important work and thorough work that has been done. What this committee has done is not made decisions for us, and I read the entire report, and I'm very pleased with what I saw, and there's a lot of good information for us to build on. So I think we need to continue to study it, because we have spent a lot of money on this. I mean, I'm one who keeps saying, well, why do we need an expert to come in and tell us what to do here, what to do there? Well, in this case, this was very important. This was very focused, and we had the best. And I agree with that particular company giving us advice, because we did have the best. So I say, let's go with that, see what it tells us. You know, as I said, we're a city with agricultural land, and we have a lot of people who want to become farmers. We have a lot of support for those young farmers coming on board. I've given all my farming stuff to them because I'm done.
We want to go keep the committee?
I want to keep the committee going.
Want to keep the committee active, and then move forward with us looking at certain items, having some focused educational workshops going forward.
Definitely.
Okay, and handling some of these items before we make any more, or any further discussion. Well, we haven't done any, but any decisions. And there's a lot of things to look at. For example, funding mechanisms for reinvestment into agriculture. There needs to be sources, thought through on that, and how do we do that? So there's a lot of technical aspects here, too, that can be part of these educational workshop items.
Yeah. With the addition of a few more individuals. I mean, if this committee is still willing to work.
Yeah, I'm not sure everyone is, but that would be an opportunity to poll the committee and see who, and if you wish to bring other people in, that's another opportunity too. We understand our charge to have been completed.
Right, okay.
Comments before Councilor Gary?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. My vision of this new committee or board would be that it would be fluent with the state statutes dealing with agriculture, as well as it would look at the ordinances of other towns and municipalities of the state and how they deal with issues dealing with ag and farm and whatever else, and how they conserve land, as well as possibly even looking at other states and how they deal with ag issues, and maybe possibility of what incentives that they can legally offer to encourage farming.
Very good. So Councillor Hayes, you had one comment, then we'll kind of try to get a little bit of a consensus on this.
I think Councilor Fournier hit on it. I think this committee has certainly done a lot of work, and I'm sure they've presented materials to us, and we never asked them whether they want to continue or not. I'm sure there's members that would like to, but I think it should be maybe in the form of a new committee, one that I feel it should be a permanent committee. I think they have suggested setting up much like the planning board, where there'd be a rotation of people, but people that do have credentials to really bring forth ideas to the council.
Well, let's evaluate that as we go forward. In the meantime, thank you for the committee and the chairs for all the work. We'll officially disband the mayor's ad hoc agricultural committee. We will talk amongst the council later on, actually after this meeting. I'd like to reconvene this workshop item because I do think we have a short special session. And I also want to give time for people in the public if they want to speak during our open sessions too, which will be coming in the next couple of minutes, about forming a new mayor's ad hoc committee in preparation for the further work that we have to do, to include but not excluding a permanent committee. There are steps and processes, and I want to make sure we're following them. So with that said, thank you very much. This workshop will stand adjourned. We will reconvene for our normal scheduled city council meeting in approximately 4 minutes at 7 p.m. Thank you. Normal, not no such thing as normal. Sorry about the delay. I will now call to order this City Council meeting of July 16, 2018. Please stand and join me in the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag
Of the United States of America, and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Okay, moving right along, we have first on the agenda is consent items. Order number 5907162018, nominating Peter Creighton, Auburn City Manager, as a write-in candidate on the official ballot for Maine Municipal Association's Legislative Policy Committee for District 20 for the 2018 to 2020 term. Do I have a motion?
So moved, Mr. Mayor.
Second.
I have a motion from Councilor Fournier and a second from Councilor Walker. By a show of hands, all those in favor? Motion carries 5-0. Next, minutes. Are there any corrections to the minutes for the July 2nd, 2018 regular council meeting? If not, I'm going to entertain a motion to approve the minutes of the July 2nd regular city council meeting.
I move we approve the minutes for July 2nd, 2018, which was a regular council meeting.
Second.
Motion by Councilor Fournier and a second by Councilor Walker. Show of hands, all those in favor? Minutes are approved by vote 5-0. Next, communications, presentations, and recognitions. I'd like to introduce basically representatives from the National Association of NAFSC. I know them as AARP. So if you want to stand and come forward. Oh, Network of Age-Friendly Communities. I'm sorry.
Good evening.
Good evening.
I'm Lori Parham. I'm the State Director for AARP here in Maine, and I have Rich Livingston, our volunteer state president and former counselor from Auburn, and Bill Phillips, who's on our advisory council and lives locally with me this evening. We're very excited to be here to present a certificate to Auburn for joining the AARP Maine network of age-friendly communities. For those of you who may not know, AARP is a nonpartisan, nonprofit social mission organization with 230,000 members across Maine. We advocate on issues that impact people 50 plus and their families and provide information and education, as well as work with local communities on issues that impact older Mainers. And we're thrilled to have Auburn join the network, and we look forward to working closely with Auburn as local residents and the council and the municipality look to assess what changes you may want to make that would benefit older Auburn residents and their families. I want to be clear that this work isn't just about people over 50, but about all generations and changes that can improve the quality of this already wonderful city for all generations. So we're thrilled to be able to present the certificate to you, Mr. Mayor.
Well, thank you very much, really, for your time, and all three of you for coming today. And we gladly accept that certificate. This is obviously Auburn being the first city or community in Androscoggin County to receive this and qualify. And I'd be remiss if I didn't, first of all, kind of give us a little history, or give everyone a little history on this. One of my first acts as mayor was to form a mayoral ad hoc committee on aging issues. And it was beautifully co-chaired by Councilor Gary and Councilor Walker, and ably assisted by city staff, school department staff, citizens. And they all came together and really had these discussions, sometimes hard at times, but filled out the application, went through it, did the research, and I'm very proud of them. And I would be honored if Councilor Gary and Councilor Walker could come forth and accept this presentation on behalf of myself and the rest of the council. We could maybe come right up to the front and get a couple pictures of this would be great. Mr. Jannings, you want to take some? You can't take a picture, can you?
Oh, certainly.
I'll stand behind you. You did the work. You filled out. I think I just signed something. You did. That's great. looking group. Thank you very much. Good job, thank you. Now I can say before we move on that Councilor Gary, Councilor Walker, the real work begins. There's a lot of benefits to being a recognized community by the AARP. And I'm looking forward, I think everybody in Auburn should be looking forward to the changes that come to benefit the entire city over the upcoming months and years. So look forward to hearing your updates in the future. Okay, moving forward. First, open session. Members of the public are invited to speak to the City Council about any issue that is not on tonight's City Council agenda, which still permits conversation about what happens during the workshop. That's a separate issue. So, no, please come forward. That's okay. Please limit your comments to about 3 minutes, just because we do have a lot of people. I'll give you, for you, you get about 30 seconds either way.
Yeah.
Okay?
I'm going to try to be quick. I know. But it's been a while since I've seen you people.
You can't bank time, though.
Okay, all right. I'm not going to be nice. I'm going to be nice-ish, but I'll move along without the pleasantries. Okay. Renee Simonitis, 9 Oak Street, Auburn, Maine, Ward 3. Okay, so I'm here again being the watchdog of civility groups, and so I'm addressing specifically the presentation from the workshop from the Reviving Civility. I want to start with just a quick quote from a thinker I appreciate, John Taylor Gatto, who's a former New York Teacher of the Year, just as a kind of an overview of where I'm coming from with my thoughts on this. So he starts, the Germans, the North Germans, the Prussians, figured out that people who had a deep understanding of history were dangerous because they could think in context. What the Prussians wanted to produce were problem solvers who had no idea whether the problem they were solving was going to make a problem for someone else, like building an atomic bomb. They simply were technicians, and the Germans were wonderful at producing problem solvers. But they said in their private discussions that only one person out of every 200 should be allowed to think in historical context to figure out what the point of solving the problem was and what kinds of ideas it grew out of. And that would be the that was a thing that I'd heard in a previous thing that I exposed myself to, because I like to expose myself to different viewpoints. And it rolled through my head the whole time I was looking through the links that were given in what was in the notes online for this. And one of the first things I did was went to the Civility in America study that they gave. And they put it online, and I have a copy for the register, in case they didn't give that to you. It was an online study that was posted from January 2nd to January 17th, 2018. 15 days online. I often see these kind of statistics come in for these studies and think to myself, you know what, I never get called. I never get calls. I never see these online petitions. I'm never one of the samples of American people that gives an opinion on any of these studies. So I always kind of start from a little place of cynicism when I see these studies, because I'm like, my voice is never heard in these. And then when I looked at the sample size, according to their website, it was 1,481 U.S. adults, 18 plus, adults from a national consumer panel. Again, 15 days this survey was online, and I had no knowledge of it. I never saw any kind of thing that told me I could go to this place and give my opinion about civility in America. And, and we're a nation of, and I looked this up, 327.16 million Americans. So you were told tonight that the majority of Americans, really? 327.16 million Americans, and the study was of 1,400 people, almost 1,500. That's not a huge sample size of Americans. And the other thing I noticed as I was reading through the study was that the language in almost all of the statistics that they're giving is Republican and Democrat. Until the very end, they distinguish Democrats and independents from Republicans. I'm not a Democrat or a Republican. I'm not an independent. I'm a libertarian. That demographic isn't on here at all. And so I think it's a little bit of a critical stretch to say you guys are given statistics that accurately represent the majority of Americans' feelings on civil discourse in America. So I'm just going to question that, and I'm going to throw that out there. And then all of the questions, well, okay, first of all, what is civility and what is respect? If I polled you secretly, you, and about 10 of you from back here, I bet I'd get about 15 different answers on what feels like civility and respect in conversation. I mean, I think there would be some things that we could probably agree on were incivil or disrespectful, but there would be things that some people would say, I don't have a problem with that, and other people would say, I do have a problem with that. So the whole study itself is based on people's, and it's really vague, it doesn't give a whole lot of definitions for things, people's opinions and people's emotions on the topic. So we're going to have a movement or a program, and I know it doesn't cost you anything, but the reason I'm here today is not because, I mean, if you want to work on your civility, you think there's a civility problem in America, then go to the website and take the individual pledge as individuals. If that's what you want to do, have at it. I mean, I'm all for that as a libertarian.
I'm sorry, just to clear, we aren't going to be taking council-wide action or anything on this.
Okay, because
this is a purely individual.
Okay, as an individual thing, because when he says he wants to meet with you further, it didn't take too long, unlike the Green Dot who worked with the city manager's office to come up with a resolution. They don't need to work with you for a resolution because they have a pre-made one for the mayor to sign. And that is the place where this steps into not being okay, is when you guys are given a resolution about encouraging, that you're either sticking to, and then encouraging the citizens to be a part of civility and respect, because that's speech. You're talking about speech at that point. And I would say that I'm thankful to hear that there's no other movement, that you do not intend to meet with him further from a governmental standpoint. Because if you did, and if you did sign that, you can count on me taking that month that you name and being as disrespectful and uncivil in speech as I could be for that entire month. So thank you for listening, and I appreciate just that you're willing to listen to me be the watchdog on this issue. I don't want to see a whole bunch of incivility and disrespect. I want to see people being able to discuss things well, but I don't want to see it coming from you guys, because that starts to infringe on the First Amendment rights of American citizens. And I'll give this to there. Thank you.
Thank you. Anybody else from the public like to speak? Our librarian is coming. Thank you, Mamie.
Harriet, the librarian. Okay. Good evening, Mayor and councilors. My name is Mamie Anthony. I'm the director of the Auburn Public Library. This past Thursday, John Kelly, who had been employed by the library for 44 and a half years, retired. We were very sad to see him go, and we wish him all the best. I know that there are a lot of people that would like to still celebrate him, and I'm inviting anybody who's interested to come in the library within this week to sign his guest book that we have at our front desk. John was a very special member of the library community and of the community itself. He appreciated the key to the city being presented to him, and he is missed already. So please stop by the library and extend your good wishes to him by signing the guest book. Thank you.
Just sounded like he was going on the opposite side of the counter, frankly. When I talked with him, he just said he's going to be there all the time. He's just not going to be, he's going to be on the opposite side of the counter.
Actually, he did stop by today.
44 years is hard to shake. That's it. And, and Mamie, congratulations to you as well on this. That's a testament to your leadership over there as well. Thank you. Anybody else?
Hello, Council. Hi, Mayor. My name is Rita Morin, and I'm representing 150 Soapers Mill Road in Auburn, Ward 5. And this has to do with the ad hoc committee's recommendations and its final report for the AGRP zoning district. we thoroughly came to that consensus with the recommendations for a commission/committee/board with the set of criteria specific to what would best govern and work alongside other municipal boards, like the planning board, like the council, and provide more data, knowledge, and wisdom, because we will have people who have sat on our ad hoc committee who have knowledge, who have master's degrees in sustainable agriculture, who are generations deep into agriculture and have shown that that's very viable, sustainable, and economically healthy for our city. We also want to think forward that it's not just about farming, it's about resource protection. We have a massive lake that serves our entire population in this area. So keeping that ecologically and environmentally healthy is I would say probably very important point to consider when you're making your considerations for a commission or committee/board. This was a huge can of worms, and it's not fair to open it and hope a few wiggle your way. I'm sure a few of us feel like it would be so beneficial to if, I could build a home on our 150 acres that we have here in Auburn. Our family could be together. We could farm as a family. That would be wonderful. I would forgo all of that if I could just protect what we have here in Auburn, because it really is an impressive and unique situation that we've had for 50 years. And the comments by the council that it is an impressive feat, and then the comment by you, Honorable Mr. Mayor, is it impressive or oppressive that it has been undeveloped for so long, or we've had these blockades in place or protections? So I say, is it impressive or oppressive that that larger cities like Lewiston, Biddeford, Saco have no land left for development because they have densely developed what remains of it? And then I have to also say, before I close, we have data, we have knowledge, we have wisdom. And the wisdom, you gave credit to the city council, and that's, subjective and debatable. And we hope that that's the case. We rely and put our hands in you and our trust in you that you can uphold what the citizens really want, especially in some of the areas that are more agriculturally dense, like mine, Ward 5. The data came from the consultants and the ad hoc committee, and we tried to do as best of a job as we could with the data that we actually had. There's not a lot that goes on in 50 years when you don't allow a lot to go on, positively and negatively. Knowledge can be gained by allowing those who are actively engaged in ag, conservation, forestry to be involved in the decision making. And wisdom comes from us over time and is best learned from those with knowledge in the areas we need to become wiser in. So I implore you to read through our thorough and thoughtful recommendations about the criteria for a board or a council for the AGRP zone, just because we think it's important to uphold the standards of having people who are actively engaged in agriculture locally and having outside expertise like the Maine Cooperative Extension, Land Trust, leaving some additional seats for people who are committed to a volunteer-style committee, commission/board, whatever you determine is legally appropriate for our city, and goes along with our city plan. So thank you for your time, and I appreciate it.
Thank you.
Thank you.
I'm sorry, Mr. Moore, I didn't have enough time to flip through, I know. What farm do you own or work for?
My family owns the Karen Farm on Soapers Mill Road in Auburn.
Karen Farm?
Yes.
Thank you, I'm just helping my knowledge.
No, that's good, yeah. And we operate a produce farm off that farm. So we're revitalizing it. It has been a non-working farm for many decades due to aging farmers.
Did you, just on that note, were you able to successfully find funding sources to help revitalize that aging farm?
We have independently funded doing that ourselves, and we would be looking in the future probably toward funding, but we didn't want to get ourselves deep in. So we're starting out the right way, and then down the road when we want to try to expand and work on different value-added products for the city and enhance those areas of agriculture, food production, those are things that we can look at.
It would probably be helpful at that point, maybe some grants or zero-interest loans kind of managed by an entity in order to help jumpstart that.
Absolutely. And I wouldn't be fair to say that I do represent the Good Food Council when I come in and I talk about some of these things, that we support the city's commitment to good food policy and culturally appropriate food lifestyles and health within our city. So it's been a pleasure to be a part of the ad hoc committee and meet so many wonderful people that I never would have met because all we do is work. So it would be grateful, we would be very grateful if you would take our recommendations into consideration.
Absolutely. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Take care.
Thank you.
Hi, Council. Hi, Mr. Mayor. Thanks for taking a moment to listen to me. So I have been waiting 10 months to convey this to you guys. When our first, so I introduced myself. My name is Karen Bolduc. I live at Soapers Mill Road. I was a member of the recently disbanded ad hoc committee. And when we first convened at that very first meeting, there was a little bit of skepticism in the room that maybe we were just figureheads and decisions had already been made, and we were trying to figure each other out and see what our task really was, what we were charged with. And I am an optimist eternally, and I said, hey, look, I think the council is an intelligent bunch of people, and if they have appointed a committee to thoughtfully consider the recommendations of the consultants, which the city paid a good amount of money for, and we come up with some recommendations and we present it, they'll listen to us. And this is what I've waited to tell you, is that there was audible laughter in the room at that point, okay? So there was not a lot of confidence that our recommendations would be heard. So I just want you to be aware of that, and I'm very hopeful that you prove that laughter wrong. And like I said, I was the optimist. I believe you will. But the recommendation that we came to, the primary one about the Standing Commission, it was not something that we just sort of took lightly. And it was certainly not an act of self-preservation. It was kind of insinuated earlier that maybe we would just stay on board and become permanent. And I can tell you that I took an informal poll at our last meeting of who would be interested in continuing on this permanent commission that we were suggesting, and there was only a couple of hands that went up at that time. So emphatically not an act of self-preservation on our committee. This was the result of a thoughtful process. So I guess just a few quick thoughts that I took notes that I just wanted to convey to you guys on why a permanent committee? What is the good point? Why do a permanent committee? What's the point of that? So a few things. We're sitting on a tremendous resource, right? The much hated 50% rule actually ended up having sort of a great, I have a love-hate relationship with that rule, because I think one of the great things that ended up happening is we were able to preserve a lot of land that could be used for natural resources, agriculture, and forestry uses, which is great. But now that we have that land preserved, you know, what are we going to do with it? And there is no single rule or quick ordinance that can be put in place that is going to answer that question. These are very complex issues. And as Mary, our chair, referenced earlier, many of potential answers to that question can have unintended consequences. So we really want to think thoughtfully about how that plays out. And, you know, our thought about the permanent committee is that those people can more thoughtfully address those issues. And further, you know, we had some recommendations about the types of people who would sit on that committee. And it was not only experts or, you know, people actively involved in agriculture and forestry, but also anyone who has policy experience in those same areas. So this would be a group of intelligent, concerned citizens and experts and professionals in that field. And I personally am speaking for myself when I say I certainly would not see that as a diffusion of the city council's duties to just say, well, you guys do it. I would see it, I would frame it as you having the perspective and wisdom to say, wow, we don't know everything about this, and there are lots of people and resources in our community who do. Let's look to them and see what they have to offer. So the one reason for the permanent committee is the complexity of the issues. A second is that it kind of provides a consistent policy framework to address agricultural, natural resource, and forestry issues. So where you might have, you know, this would happen independent of whatever the administration, city administration was in the office, and it kind of enables you to avoid political hurdles and things like that. It's just concerned citizens that care about agriculture and forestry looking at these issues thoughtfully. So a consistent policy framework is another good reason for a permanent committee, in my opinion. And then thirdly, not that we have to care about what the federal government is doing, but if you do, you know, the basic task that or some form of this task is what the committee would be charged with, you know, looking thoughtfully at the agriculture and natural resource sector of Auburn's local economy. And in doing that, the federal government, as an example, okay, is USDA announced in 2018 $90 million in money that it planned to invest in that very thing, in local agricultural systems. So
Mrs. Bolduc, you've gone well over your time, but I just want to say that I don't want to necessarily cut you off.
Sure.
But if you want to be like, maybe to be continued in some of your statements as we keep working through the workshop process.
Yeah, or I can just wrap it up right now, because that's
either way.
Yep, thanks for the heads up. So that's really my last point, just that the federal government thinks it's important. So my final thought would just be that anything worth having is worth focusing concerted attention on and investing time and effort in, and that's what our committee sees, that's what our ad hoc committee sees a permanent agricultural commission as doing, is giving focused attention to that issue. So thank you for listening to me.
Thank you very much. I'm sorry, the name of your, do you have a farm name?
South Auburn Organic Farm is the name of
South Auburn Organic Farms? Okay.
Thanks.
Thank you. Anybody else? This is going once. Anybody else want to speak? Please come forward.
Good evening. My name is Peter Moore. I'm a landowner on the Jordan School Road. I participated in a number of 4 or 5 of the committee meetings and was encouraged by the dialogue, the outcomes, and the potential for things to change. I would just like to say that I think that as a business person myself, having worked and helped hundreds of companies all throughout the state in the last 40 years, I think the Auburn is sitting on a gold mine of opportunity with the ag zone. And I think that any opportunity to relieve some of the restrictions on that ag zone could really unleash some wonderful economic opportunity, innovations, and possibilities that none of us might even contemplate while we're sitting here today. I think that there can be a relaxation of restrictions without the city losing control, and I think that's important to understand. And gosh knows that there isn't a business in almost any town that isn't subject to some sort of regulation of one kind or another from one or more governmental agencies. So it's not like if you relax a few of the current significant restrictions like the income test and the minimum lot size that all of a sudden there's going to be pandemonium. I think that sort of would be something that would be highly unlikely. But I think that with the movements in small-scale agriculture today and the forest resources that we have, there are just scores of opportunities to create more economic value in the city. And that, of course, benefits all the taxpayers in the city and has an opportunity to provide even nominal relief to some degree if you can unleash the economic potential of 40+% of the city's land mass. So I think that there are plenty of examples of businesses throughout the state that are thriving in starting out at a small scale and becoming larger in scale and prosperous and become good contributors to the community. And the restrictions that we have on the land now really prohibit even the beginning of many businesses that could be agriculture or resource-based. So relieving some of those restrictions, particularly in the agricultural area where living on the land is important, particularly in the early stages of trying to develop a small-scale enterprise that could someday become the primary and dominant source of income for a family or a business. If you can't start small and you can't live on that property, you may not ever start at all. So relieving that income restriction, that's probably one of the most significant things that both the consultant and the committee had to wrestle with. And in the event that there is an ongoing committee or commission of any kind, I'd be more than happy to participate in that. I think that's a good idea, to have ongoing dialogue for the city to get feedback from the ag zone, whether it's the business owners in the ag zone or the landowners themselves. So, thank you.
Mr. Rohr, thank you very much. I appreciate that. Real quick question while we wait for the next person to come up. Do we have an enforcement mechanism on the 50% income guidelines for people living in ag zone? Do we check that annually? Mr. Chamings, Eric?
Do you want to address that?
And I'm sorry to take away from public discussion, but I think it's important just while it's right there.
We do a very thorough review on the front end when somebody is applying for a home and saying that it's tied to agriculture, that they meet the income standard. And honestly, after that, unless the appearance of the farm substantially changed and it looked like the farm was not active, we don't do a regular annual review or anything like that. It would really be if the property was not being used for the agricultural purpose, that became obvious or was brought to our attention, then we would look at it.
Very good, thank you. That obviously took away from your 3 minutes.
No, it's okay.
I'm just joking.
My name is Kathy Shaw. I own and operate Valley View Farm on Soapers Mill Road in Auburn. And I cannot emphasize the importance of a serious and thorough study of this ag zone. It's been 50 years of preservation. And as much as we're celebrating the 150th anniversary of Auburn, I think this is also a landmark legacy that has been created for us and should be handed forward. In this ag committee work, I have met and increased the bottom line of my store by 5 new farmers that I never would have met before. I've helped to increase their bottom line through my sales at my shop and also at the farmer's market. They offer wonderful products, no chemicals, and they're offering me the opportunity to provide people in this town with more local food. Local food, not food that's trucked from hundreds and hundreds of miles away, picked half ripe and ripened as it moves across the country. This is not a resource that we can stand to waste. And I will respectfully disagree that if we loosen the 50% rule, that change is not going to happen. It'll happen in a big way. And I don't really want to see that occur. I think there are people that live in this ag zone that have owned land, that maybe don't own the 10 acres, that have tried very hard, that there could be some exceptions made. But you can sure bet that somebody that owns 100 acres, that bought it for cheap, if they can develop, they will. And it'll be gone. We cannot get that back. There are some areas of Auburn, for my farm, for instance, I have half of my 75 acres that can be actively cultivated. And I also, it's covered with stone walls. The other 50 acres is really just rough pasture, and it's only good for grazing. You can't grow anything there. It's rocks, plain and simple.
It's Maine.
It's Maine. We grow great rocks out on Soapers Mill Road, by the by. So
That's the industry in itself, by the way.
it could be.
I see that
It
on
could
Swimming
be.
Pool Masters. They're buying
I
rocks
think
from
there are opportunities for lots of new innovation here. Farms don't have to be 100 acres. They don't have to be 10 acres. They can be a quarter of an acre. They come in all shapes and sizes. And so I just really, really encourage you folks to take to heart this study. A lot of thought and hard work has gone into it. I would listen to Joe come home after all of these meetings and just rant and rave. He's afraid, and I am too, that we're going to lose something that's really intrinsic and valuable. And I will fight, and I promise you a fight, a civil fight, to retain my right and the right of others to live and farm in these areas of Auburn.
Well, first, before you do that, thank you. Second, if you could take some of that passion and let's think of some solutions to be part of the process ongoing, that'd be great.
Ask Leroy. I bring plenty of passion to no matter what I do. Not like that, Leroy.
Leroy.
Thank you.
Councilor Walker, I'm sure will attest. Thank you very much. Is there anybody else who would like to speak during this first open session? Sir?
A lot of passion on this subject. My name is Terry Daly. I live on North River Road and own Brickwell Stables. The biggest thing, everybody talks about farming, but you got to think about this a little bit. If you want to encourage new farmers, they've got to be able to buy land and live there. If you don't relax the rules that you have, that's never going to happen. I did a lot of research. I wasn't part of the committee. I did a lot of research, drove around. Kind of surprised me in the last 40 years how many houses were built in ag zone, how many were never farms. I don't know how that happened exactly. But I'm afraid, and what I'm hearing is we're going to keep kicking this can down the road. We've already preserved the land. I think we're all smart enough to figure out how to allow growth at a slow rate to allow people to come in and start small farms. I built my whole place brand new. The city didn't help me at all, and the city was not my fan. You've got to allow people to come in. If you go back to a year ago November, I'm talking 2016, you had a meeting and invited the public. I think an example would be hunters. Hunters have rights, but those rights don't overweigh my rights as a landowner. The people that spoke in that meeting for the most part were people that own land in ag zone. So we're talking about rights and what the city wants, but that shouldn't overweigh the rights of the landowners. They're the ones paying the taxes on it, just like myself. When I bought my property, it's 36 acres, I believe the tax bill was around $400 a year. I've built a house by the rules of the 50%. I took in, my stable was up first. I've increased the size of my stable. I have 4 running sheds. I pay $8,000 a year taxes right now. And I live on the worst road in Auburn. I have no children. So I don't think when you look at what the cost is for allowing houses, that it's realistic. For sure, I'm paying in more than I'm getting back from the city. What I'm recommending is let's not keep kicking this can down the road. In your package, I presented a suggested plan on how to control growth, but allow growth. It doesn't have to be that way 100%, but we don't need any more consultants. We don't need to be talking about this 3 years from now that we're going to do something. We need to do something. If you want to encourage farmers, and I'm very much in agreement, I'm looking at different things that I plan to do, which is all related to farming, but you've got to allow it to happen. The population that owns ag, for the most part, is older. And if you go and survey those people, they're not going to farm. At this point in their life, they're not going to farm. By allowing them to sell part of their land or sell it to their children, you might encourage farming. But that's, in a nutshell, I'm in agreement with what the committee did, but we can't keep kicking the can down the road. We've got to start. We preserved the land for 50 years. Now let's make the next step and let's make it work for everybody.
Thank you. It's an interesting point about controlled growth. And I mean, right now we all have to realize that Auburn has zero growth. Our population is actually decreasing. And I believe, City Manager, you gave I'm going to put you on the spot here. Androscoggin County as a whole is projected to lose population or lose growth in the next decade, correct?
I suggested in Ag Zone that we have a minimum 10-acre lot, that they all be legal surveyed lots. I suggested that one lot per 5 years for building. That would control how fast you build. In looking around, everybody was doing we would be barraged with new construction. Not true. If you look at what's in that report, I named every road that I actually drove on and looked at on the city maps and checked. You could only build so many houses under the rules that I proposed. And if you added the non-conforming lots, that's lots under 10 acres, that would still not massively affect the city, because the city in the last 10 years has averaged, I believe, 40 houses a year in construction. The previous 20 years, they averaged 80 houses a year. So that kind of tells me that we could sustain 40 additional houses a year without messing this city up very much, you know, if we do it controllably.
And I just asked the city manager for a copy of that report. I have not seen it. I'm not sure if anyone else in the council has, but that will be part, and we'll take that into consideration, along with anybody else's written testimony or facts as we go through this process. So thank you for that. I look forward to reading it. So we'll make sure, if Mr. Manager, if you could get that out to everybody to review as well. Thank you. Is there anybody else who would like to speak? If not, we'll be moving on. Okay, none being, we will move on to the next agenda item. And thank you, everybody, who did speak during that last public session. It was very informative. Unfinished business. We have no unfinished business. We're going to move on to new business. Ordinance. We have a proposed ordinance amendment amending the Parks and Recreation Advisory Board ordinance, Chapter 2, Article 5, Division 4, Section 2-454, subsection B. I will entertain a motion.
So moved.
Second.
I have a motion from Councillor Fournier and a second from Councillor Walker. I'm going to open up this topic to public hearing. Is there any members of the public that would like to speak on this? Ms. Crowley,
Yes.
before you're allowed to speak, I would like to let everybody know publicly, thank you for all your hard work on the sesquicentennial celebration.
Oh, you're welcome.
And for
It's
other
a fun
topics,
time.
I really do think that it's much appreciated, so thank you very much.
I think I'm trying to match the red. We're working on it.
There you go.
Better than the rest of us, but thank you.
Thank you.
Pretty close.
Yeah, for the record, I'm Tiz Crowley. I live on University Street in Auburn. I didn't intend to talk, but I saw this on here, and I have a feeling that, along with probably 11 other people in the city of Auburn, you may not, we're probably the only people who know a few things. So I know the intent of the amendment was to eliminate the ward requirement. It's the only committee we have, and it is restricting the opportunity for membership to appoint members to it. And I would agree that that element needs to be changed, though I would encourage you to make the element say something like that no one ward could control a majority of the votes, so that you couldn't have all of us in Ward 4 run the City of Parks and Recreation Advisory Board. And I say that because I actually serve on another board, the Water District, and I actually sat down one day and thought, we're 4-3, 4 customers and 3 non-customers on that board. So with a single appointment, you could literally have a water board without having customers, the majority of the customers on there. So my number one thing is make sure that you put a high limit on it, so no one ward could have the majority. There are a couple other things that you need that I don't know if they were brought up and discussed, but to expand the number so that the Recreation Board is like others, which is, say, 7 regular members plus 2 alternates, which are people who vote in the event that one is missing. It allows you to conduct more business. It provides a growth on the committee, creates some experience. And when you do have a number of absences, which in the past, meaning 5 or 6 years ago, they couldn't get a quorum in those days, even with 7. So I'd ask you to look at alternates. You may not want to do it now, but if you're going to touch this part, you might consider to look at the ordinance as a whole. Prior to this, prior to reactivating the Parks and Recreation Advisory Board approximately a year and a half ago, the mayor's appointed substitute, the Recreation and Special Events Advisory, actually took the ordinance and went line by line. There is a recommendation with staff someplace where that work group looked through it and made changes. So there were a number of them, I just can't remember it, but we literally, the committee as a whole, ultimately voted on changes and passed it on to staff. It was a lot of work. There's more than one element besides this, having limits on wards that should be looked at. Now, when you look at that draft of the update, you have to remember that 4 years ago, Auburn made the decision that parks would separate from recreation, which is not uncommon. There are many. I don't know which side's the majority, but that decision was made to put parks under public services and recreation to remain alone. So this ordinance changes I'm talking about is focused on that. So you won't see a lot of parks references because the intention was to clean up the ordinance and parks is separate. I don't know whether you're going to reaffirm that it's Parks and Recreation Advisory, or whether you're going to, as long as the legal structure is as it is, to separate it out. Either way, you might seek from the Park Subcommittee of Conservation. And so I think I've covered all of those. The original, which is, please make sure there's no majority from one ward. Please expand the number to include alternates. Please review what the prior committee did on the draft. Understand that originally, in the way our city is currently structured, parks is not part of Parks and Recreation. And then ultimately, the decision you really need to make is to either reaffirm that we are keeping Parks and Rec separate, or that after a 3.5-year experience, we're going to put them back together. Thank you for your attention.
Ms. Crowley, thank you very much for that. I do think you bring up some very tactical and strategic issues or subject matter. So, and tactical, short-term, and long-term, and I think we did miss a workshop item earlier due to ag workshop going longer. We're going to revisit that tonight, talking about our committees and so forth. I'll be with the city manager and the city clerk. So thank you very much for that.
Adam Lee, Garden Circle. I'd urge passage of this amendment as is. Everyone who knows who's served on the Committee on Committees knows that the worst thing that can possibly happen is having residents who want to be involved in the progress of the city, but an inability to put them in those positions. As Councilor Crowley said, this is the only committee that has that restriction. It's a restriction that does not make sense, so I'd urge passage. Councilor Crowley and I had several discussions about this. Some would say they were civil debates about this. I agree that it would be good to achieve ward balance, but sometimes ward balance is not achievable. And when you have folks who have registered and decided that they want to serve the city, you shouldn't use ward balance as a basis to not allow them to serve the city. So I'd urge passage of the amendment. Thank you.
Counselor Lee, I just got reminded that counselor is a title that you'll keep for the rest of your life, and I believe you can bestow upon your firstborn male heir. Counselor Crowley, I apologize for not addressing you as such. So thank you very much for both of you. Any other public comment on this topic? None being? Okay. I'll bring it back to the council. Is there any debate? It's a first reading, so we have one more reading after this. No debate? I'm going to ask the city clerk to move to a roll call vote.
Councillor Hayes?
Yes.
Councillor Fournier?
Yes.
Councillor Walker?
Yes.
Councillor Gary?
Yes.
Councillor Young?
Yes.
Motion carries. Or the first reading carries. Motion carries. Reports. My report. Next, mayor's report. We'll keep this nice and short. It's summer. Okay, everybody be safe out there. I know I've tried to be safe as possible. I have heard from the chief of police that we had no drastic accidents, losing of any fingers, limbs, or anything due to fireworks. Am I correct on that, chief? That is a huge victory for Auburn. Let's keep that up. On to some more serious business. It's been pretty busy. Even though it is summer, there's been a lot of meetings. As you know, the Sesquicentennial is well underway. Fundraising efforts have kicked off, and we have had some amazing response from area businesses. So those businesses have, to date, I believe, contributed or pledged to contribute almost $10,000. So that's it's a good chunk to our overall goal. So again, in the middle of the summer around a holiday week, I'm very encouraged. We are still working on getting the BRIC website up to take contributions for that. That should be up in a matter of days, hopefully, not to extend past a week. We've had a lot of people asking about how they can purchase and procure those bricks for Auburn Anniversary Park, so I'm pretty excited to see that go live and that to start flowing. We did have a great meeting today. I think talking about tourism and a regional effort. I'm sure the city manager who was there with me will talk a little bit more about that. But Auburn is well on its way to being if not the hub of tourism in Maine, to at least being a regional player. And I think that's important. I think our key signature events for our Sesquicentennial is going to play into that narrative and really help Auburn establish itself on the map as a destination and a quality place to live. So a lot of great things other than that, but I'll save it for later. I'm going to move on now to other reports, starting with city councilors. I'll start off to my right. Councilor Young.
Yes, I'd like to report that the Danville Grange is on its foundation and in the process of mending all the cracks and things from the jacking up of the Grange. It's down on the foundation now, and on the 28th of this month, they're going to have some sort of fundraiser down there. Tables, fair goods, and whatever to.
What was the date on that? Or have you yet to?
28th
of
Saturday, July. And then on another note, the Annisquam Historical Society now has control over the wash presses, West Auburn Schoolhouse. And this last Saturday, we went and did a cleaning, getting that ready for opening. Not to be announced. I don't exactly know when they're going to have it. So if you've never been to West Auburn and seen the schoolhouse, you'll have an opportunity very soon. How it was back in 1850.
You're close enough. Yeah. Close enough.
I guess they started in 1843, but all the one school mom's presentation is they picked the 1850 because that's the last year they used the to write with the feathered quill pens with the ink. That's before the steel quills. And so maybe some of you might like to have an opportunity to see if you can write with ink with a feather.
I'll take you up on that. I'll give it a shot. I could barely write.
I guess that's all I have to report at this time.
Thank you. Thank you. Councilor Hayes?
We did have an airport meeting last Thursday night. Much of it was an executive session with activities that are coming forth, so stay tuned. I think the airport truly is a gateway, and I think it's going to become more of a gateway in the future.
Councilor Fournier,
I have nothing to report tonight.
other than your motorcycle adventure across the
That's
Northeast?
right, exactly, exactly.
Little known fact, Councilor Fournier is an avid member of the Hells Angels. And she tours around New England on a motorcycle, so beware.
I love speed, so I'm always watching. You guys tell me if you catch me going a little bit too fast, please.
Councilor Walker.
Thank you. I'd like the public to know that we are going to meet tomorrow night at our senior citizen building at Pettingill Park at 5:30. Age-friendly community is what we call ourselves, and we would love to have all of you come and meet with us, and we'll see if we can blow the walls out of the building and pack the house. So 5:30 tomorrow night, come on down. We'd love to listen to your questions, answers, ideas, thoughts, or anything else you may have. 5:30 tomorrow night. Belinda and I will be there with some other friends, we hope, and we will discuss age-friendly ideas and thoughts. Thank you.
Councilor Gary.
Echoing or adding on to his thought is the main thrust of our committee is to listen to all Auburn residents and their concerns about growing older and how the city can help them as they grow older and meet their needs, how we can make our city greater and more walkable and accessible for anybody of any age. So we need to hear from Auburn residents. It's why Councilor Walker has invited everybody to come. We can't address issues and try to correct them if we don't know about them. One of the issues that we had heard about, or at least I had heard about, was in today's age, we're getting more people running about or rolling about with the power chairs. And depending on the weather, the temperatures, and the length of some of our events, sometimes they start to run out of power. So one of the first things that we as age-friendly group is going to try to figure out how to centrally locate some power stations so that they can plug in their electric vehicles at key intersections around the city. That way we'll hopefully get more attendance so people aren't afraid to get out and then say, whoops, how am I going to get back? Changing gears, the good mayor did show up at our LATC meeting.
Was there doubt?
With previous mayors? Yes. So I'm really heartened to know that our mayor keeps his word. He was very patient, attentive. I don't know if he got any of his questions answered, so I'm hoping that he will come back on a more regular basis. The good mayor has also said that as he contacts businesses to find out their needs, that he will also try to find out if they would be willing to help, if a business that's here in Auburn, currently or locating here, if their workers need transportation bus services, he's going to ask them if some of his employees need transportation, if that company would also be willing to put some money into the funding. So in other words, he's going to help us with supplementing our resources, which is going to be a good shot in our arm. Also, came up that the subcommittee that's looking at our root system and trying to improve our system is going to have to expand a little bit to include a few more people from the Lewiston side, as well as maybe pull in some other department people from both sides, including maybe economic development and possible maybe engineering. Because as we expand our routes and as we bring in businesses, that's where economic development comes in, we're going to have to design our city and our buildings so that when we increase our bus routes and our time frames, see, that's where the key is. If we can increase the funding, increase the routes, we can increase the hours of operation, which will increase ridership. Everything is contingent. Nothing happens overnight, so I'm encouraged that this is going to be a worthwhile project to give the shot in the arm to develop a better transportation system for both Auburn residents and Lewiston residents. So first, this is the first real good news that I've heard in a long time. And I think the mayor got in a little bit more than he bargained for. And I think the city manager as well, but I know both of them are up to the task. And then on a funner note, I was privileged to, before the LATC meeting, to be up at Gleason's radio station up on Center Street, and I was able to meet 3 of the Twin City Thunder hockey players. And I don't forget my responsibility as a city councilor, nor do I forget my city councilor companions. So when I can score something for me, I've also scored stuff for you guys. So I have scored compliments of Gleason's radio station, because he's, I guess, one of the prime sponsors of the Twin City Thunder. I've also met a few other of the prime sponsors at that event, but ta-dum,
there you go.
Very nice, thank you.
So, Councilor Walker's shirt, which I just ta-dummed, is this one.
We could, maybe we could do that right after the meeting, that way
Oh.
nobody has to, talk about sizes? Okay.
Well, no.
Just throw that out there.
You guys are going to have to wear whatever I've given you, and if they don't fit, you're going to have to swap them in.
We'll just throw them right in the middle of the floor once the cameras go dark, and we'll fight for them. There'll be a little civility in politics there. Thank you. Is there anything else, Councilor Gary?
That's it.
Okay, well, thank you very much for that, and I just will give you a little bit of foreshadowing. We've already talked to 2 businesses. One business who is not in Auburn is willing to get some people on the bus route and pay for it. So it is moving, so thank you very much for that. I'm going to wrap it up with one more thing, and I'm remiss here. Procter & Gamble, Tam Brands, Auburn, is celebrating its 50th anniversary this year. They are having an open house in the afternoon of July 21st. I know myself and several councilors are going to be going for a tour. I know a lot of, I believe the entire public is invited for this. And it's a really good time to recognize and remember the fact that for 50 years they have been a cornerstone to our economy here in the city, our largest employer, and the fact that they produce 9 million, I believe, feminine hygiene products a day. It is just unfathomable, and I can't even just imagine that number. So I'm looking forward to going and visit there, and I encourage everybody in the public to reach out to them. Refer employees to them because they are hiring and they're darn good jobs, and take a peek over on July 21st and see what they're all about. So I'll turn it over to City Manager Creighton at this point for his report.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I have a few items. First of all, I would like to just mention that there will be a joint city-school workshop at 6 p.m. on August 1st to talk about the location of the new high school. The slogan is, "The future is here." Of course, I think you all know that the location is at the existing site, and you have to use your imagination to think about it differently. It's going to be reconfigured, and there were a lot of discussions over the last several months leading up to the decision. That workshop will be an opportunity for city councilors, for the mayor to, and those who attend, to be able to get more information on the location and how we're going to proceed with that project, which is a very important one, obviously. I also want to mention that Jason Paquin, the former general manager for the Norway Savings Bank Arena, has resigned. Jason made many contributions to the arena, and he'll be missed. We've had a meeting with the folks at the arena. We've had good support from a number of folks, from Sabrina Best and Jeremy from the turf facility and the team that's at the arena. John Boubier is going to be the point person. He's a special assistant in the city manager's office for the time being, while the assistant city manager position is vacant. I've asked John to take the lead on the arena and the items that need to be addressed. We do have a new hockey team starting up there in less than 10 weeks, so there's some things that need to be addressed, and I'm very confident in the work that John will do with the team that is there and the support from Sabrina and Jeremy and the other folks involved. I also want to mention on the strategic planning, we're moving forward with that, with the support of the folks that have been involved. I appreciate the mayor's involvement. We will be having all the councilors involved in one way or another. There will be 8 committees that we're looking at, 8 subcommittees, and we'll be coming to you with more of a report in August or September as the process moves forward. I'll give you somewhat of an update in August, but the kickoff we're looking at is in September. And there's a lot of work that needs to be done. I want to thank Chief Crowell and also the Economic Community Development Director, Michael Chamings, and Jody Dorisco, and the folks that are involved right now trying to develop the details on this. And the interns. We have a couple of intern special assistants in the city manager's office who've been very helpful. And I want to make a comment regarding the civility workshop. Simply this: I've known Mark Hughes for over 30 years. I first met Mark when I was in Aroostook County in the St. John Valley, working with the farmers in the St. John Valley. Mark was working for the Conservation Service at that time, and Mark has great integrity. The civility workshop that he presented is something that the council will have to discuss in terms of whether you want to move forward and do something here in the city of Auburn. But I can assure you that Mark has the best of intentions in terms of what he's doing. He spoke to the Chamber of Commerce, I think a month or so ago at one of their breakfasts. Lastly, on the tourism meeting that the mayor and I attended today, it was, I thought, a positive meeting. My compliments to Becky Conrad, the President, CEO for the Chamber of Commerce, and the leadership she's providing, along with Chairman of their board and the other folks that are involved. She is grappling with the issue of how does the Chamber address the issue of tourism, and what role should the Chamber play, and what role should the City of Auburn or City of Lewiston and the other stakeholders play in that issue. The mayor made it clear, and myself to a lesser extent, that City of Auburn is all in terms of promotion of tourism, whether it's sports tourism or other tourism that takes place. There are 4 million visitors that come to this region annually. It's a great opportunity for us to try and build on, and we certainly will continue to be part of that discussion, and I am looking forward to seeing how this is going to move forward. Thank you very much.
Thank you. and you do yourself an injustice. I think you are forcefully advocating for Auburn to take a leadership position in this, and we are moving forward. And we'll, I think it's all going to turn out to be good. There's always seems to be a little bit of a carrot in this, so to speak, and something to chase. We are now going to move on past reports. Going to open up to the second open session of the night. Members of the public are invited to speak. Please keep your comments to 3 minutes. Come up and state your name and address. Is there anybody that would like to speak during the second public session? No. We're going to be moving on then. I'm not going to close the open session. We're going to move into executive session. We need to consult with legal counsel regarding. Oh, do we want to do that before he is? Yeah, let's do it. Yeah. Okay, very good. We're going to actually go back into workshop mode at this point and just get a 15-minute brief from the city manager and city clerk on committees and boards. This is, and as you all step forward, just to kind of bring everybody up to speed, this is a great tutorial on how, just really to understand what we have going on with regards to Auburn-centric, joint services, at least in a discussion that we were just having about parks. So, and I think there'll be some more action afterwards, but let's definitely get an orientation now.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, members of the council. We're pleased to be able to present this information to you. During the retreat that was held with the council a few months ago, there was a discussion about boards and committees, and there was a task given to me in the city manager's office and the city clerk as well, in terms of coming back to you with an update on the number of boards and committees that we have and how active they are. And I will tell you, I'm amazed at the fact that all of these committees actually do meet. Now, I'm going to run through the list for the, not so much the benefit of yourselves as a group, but for those who are listening. We have the 911 committee for the Lewiston Auburn 911 Center. That meets monthly. We have the Androscoggin County Budget Committee, which City of Auburn participates in. The Androscoggin Transportation Resource Center, ATRC. I attend those meetings along with Dan Goyette, the Public Services Director. There's also a subcommittee of that, which Eric Cousins is involved in. The Androscoggin Valley Council of Governments, AVCOG, is another group that we participate with. I attend those meetings, as does Councilor Hayes and Councilor Gary. The Appointment Committee, that meets 4 to 5 times per year. Then you have the Auburn Business Development Corporation. Michael Chamings participates in that group. The Auburn Housing Authority meets monthly. Then you have the Auburn...
Sorry, Mr. Manager, Auburn Housing Authority, does that have, that has no city council appointment or staff representation?
Not to my knowledge. I think we do work closely with them. You have a comment on that?
I thought Councilor Gary was a, she's not here, right?
Go ahead.
Auburn Housing Authority. I thought she was a representative on that committee.
Okay, I'll double check. I've been to a board meeting. I just didn't see her there.
Then we have the Auburn Lewiston Municipal Airport. Councilor Hayes represents the city on that, as does Jill Eastman, the city finance director. The Auburn Sewer District, as well as the Auburn Water District. Councilor Titus participates on the board representing the city of Auburn. You have the Audit Committee, which meets by charter. I know they have representatives from the city who participate on the Audit Committee, including members of the council. I have the Board of Assessment Review. You have the Cable TV Advisory Board, which I know Councilor Young is involved in. And you have, in addition to that, you have the City Council, of course. You've got the Community Development Loan Committee, which meets monthly. Then you have the Complete Streets Committee, which is established by ordinance, that meets monthly. The Conservation Commission, established by ordinance, that meets monthly. There are subcommittees, the Community Forest Subcommittee, the Parks Subcommittee. The Ethics Panel, they do meet. I've met with them once since I've been here, although they do not meet very often. the Lewis and Auburn Railroad Company. I know that Michael Chammies attends those meetings. The Lewis and Auburn Transit Committee, which you heard about earlier. You have Councilor Gary, myself, and then Jody DeRisco, my executive assistant, who represent the City of Auburn. Then you have the Lewis and Auburn Water Pollution Control Authority. I attend those meetings representing the City of Auburn. You have the Mid-Maine Waste Action Corporation. I know Councilor Walker is very active in that group. Then you have the Parks and Recreation Advisory Board, which is set up by ordinance. That meets monthly. You have the Planning Board, set up by ordinance. That meets monthly. That's both ordinance and statute. Then you have the Library Board. Then you have the Registration Appeals Board. That's by state statute. That meets as needed, I think. Then you have the School Committee and the Zoning Board of Appeals. They meet as needed, I think, not very often, Michael, right? 2 to 3 times a year, perhaps?
2 at the most, usually.
And then you have some ad hoc committees as well that have been established. The Age-Friendly Committee, which is moving towards becoming more than an ad hoc committee. The Sesquicentennial, you say that so well, Mayor.
Say it 3 times fast, you know the punishment.
150th Anniversary Committee. How's that? Economic Development and Marketing Committee, then Agriculture and Natural Resource Economy Ad Hoc Committee, we heard from them this evening, Bells of St. Louis Committee, and Strategic Planning Committee. So the amazing thing is these committees meet. So I just wanted to present this information with the assistance of Sue. I wouldn't be able to do this if Sue hadn't provided the information to me and guided me with her experience and expertise with these committees. And I know you're looking at whether there should be any changes made with these committees.
Harmonization, I think, is a good term. Harmonization. Because there's a lot of work that happens, and I'll let you finish, but I don't necessarily think change is the appropriate word, just to be
okay.
Some, updates.
All right. Sue, anything you want to add?
I have nothing to add.
So let me just open up to the council. What I'd like to do, cut to the chase here, is form a working group of 2 councilors and 2 staff members to kind of review the harmonization of all of our committees and look at how to best convey the information gathered from these committees to the public. For example, and this is just a loose example, should the Auburn City website be changed to have just 3 categories? Ad hoc committees, which is there, but joint municipal committees, i.e. LATC and so forth, and then Auburn-centric committees, just so people have an understanding. If descriptions need to change a little bit, if there needs to be any changes with an ordinance on committees, and to really investigate how best some of the committees can work together. For example, is there duplication of efforts? We have parks, we have conservation. Come to find out, conservation has several work groups or subcommittees that they've formed on their own. I'm not exactly sure of what is going on with all those subcommittees. I'm not doubting their work, but is that information that should be facilitated or communicated out to other committees? So I think there's a lot of thought process that needs to go on, probably more so than just a workshop, though I do believe this is a very good starting point for that. I've always learned one thing: you can never doubt the work put in by individuals, and you always have to appreciate it, but it doesn't prevent you from looking at how to work smarter versus harder in a more concise fashion. And that's what I think I'd like the council to think about right now. Is there any updates, or should we form that work group? And if that work group comes back with no recommendation changes whatsoever, so be it. But I think it's time that we look at it a little bit differently. Thoughts? Councilor Gary?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I think we're at the point of time when we should look at all the committees, when they were formed, why they were formed, if they meet today and future needs, and if they need to be changed, if they don't meet, why they were set up for. Because things change over time, and so their mission statement may need to change and be revamped. And then, on the other hand, they may have met their charge. they may not need to be in existence, and like you said, it could be a duplication of a duplication. So I'd like to see it reviewed.
Okay, yeah, and I think especially earlier in the workshop, we talked about forming a new committee for ag. Let's see, at this point, what else, or what other committees or subcommittees that have been formed deal with agriculture, and let's look at it holistically. Again, harmonizing all activities. Any other thoughts or comments on this?
Mr. Mayor,
Councilor
I thought it was interesting that one of the people that spoke tonight wanted to protect the lake. We already have a committee that does that.
Right, agreed. And I'm not sure if the lake happened to do with agriculture or if it was stretched out to include conservation, which we do have a conservation committee on.
But I agree with good Councilor Gary that we should look at the mission statements of all these committees, and all these committees should look at their own mission statement and see if what they're doing follows their mission statement, because they may be trying to expand it, or maybe they're not even reaching the mission statement.
Very good. I also would throw in there too, amount of staff time going into each one of these committees and subcommittees, what the staff's role and responsibility is, and how that works with the city manager's thoughts and, you know, and budget, of course. You know, are there staff at each meeting and subcommittee meeting, and if so, what do they do? What's their task purpose? So understanding that, I think, is important. Do I have any volunteers from the council for this committee? Councilor Gary, Councilor Fournier? Obviously, you know, we'll need to get all this information back to the full council, too, at a later point in time. How long, Councilor Gary, Councilor Fournier, do you think you need to really work this issue?
My personal feeling is, once we take a look at what our mission is and our vision as a council, I mean, look at that as a starting point. Review. The review would just be, you know, several hours of review. I mean, we'd have to have all the paperwork, probably a few weeks.
Probably I'd like to let's schedule some time to talk about this at length next city council meeting when we have the full council. But let's right now, Councilor Garrett, Councilor Fournier, if you could do some of the legwork and getting us prepped, let's talk about the mission statement, some of the early discoveries, and then working with city staff under your direction, Mr. Manager, on staff participation, so we can come up with a good comprehensive timeline and plan. I'd like to see this not, you know, take longer than the next 3 to 4 months.
Oh, I was thinking maybe September 1st.
Well, I appreciate that, yeah, but let's talk about that later. I mean, there might be some time. I'm just conscious of vacations, staff's vacations as well as council, and it's summer. I've learned a long time ago that really nothing happens in Maine in summer, so it's summer.
Sue, I need to ask you a question. Do you have the mission statement from everybody, all these groups?
No, I don't
I was
believe,
going to say, you're lucky if you have 3.
right, I don't know if there are.
Find
This
out.
is going to be another one of them. You're going to dig in so deep that you're going to bury your head in the sand again. You know, you
I
can
think,
have
I think, if anything, I think just a cursory, the beginning, starting point, a cursory review of all of the data that you have, not the data, but all of the policies, and taking a look at what is entailed within all of them, then it would be very easy to say, okay, here are some components that these have, but here are some missing components. Not all have a mission statement, not all have the same outline. I mean, just looking at how the organization of that particular process is for every single one, that would reveal a lot, and that would be a starting point.
And again, we're only talking about Auburn-centric committees. Obviously, we can't talk about joint service committees, you know, with Lewiston and regional at this point, because that's a bigger conversation. But I think if we can chew off just one thing, be poignant. Okay, so let's plan on having a little update on this next council meeting. Okay, fair enough. Okay, thank you very much, both of you, for your efforts on this. Okay, we're going to get back. Thank you for that. We're going to go now, moving on to executive session. We have an executive session to consult with legal counsel regarding council's legal rights and responsibilities regarding dangerous buildings and unlicensed junkyards pursuant to 1 MRS, Section 405, 6E. Do I have a motion?
So moved.
Second.
A motion for Counselor Fournier, and a second from Counselor Walker. All those in favor? Opposed? None being, we are in executive session. Okay, thank you very much. I declare council out of executive session. Before we go into adjournment, I just want to tell everybody, this is executive session, as I stated before, was to discuss dangerous buildings and unauthorized junkyards. While we did not talk about any specific cases, the executive session was very informative on the council's legal rights and responsibilities. And I think we're going to reinforce a fairly strong line in accordance with already existing regulations and laws to make sure that Auburn stays as pristine as we could possibly make it, and to enforce our, I think, as the council thinks, good regulations with regards to dangerous buildings and unlawful junkyards. There'll be further action with regards to workshops in the future, and I look forward to that process happening. So thank you very much for that. I'm going to entertain a motion to adjourn at this point.
I move we adjourn the meeting.
A motion for Councilor Fournier. Do I have a second?
Second.
Second for Councilor Walker. All those in favor by voice vote?
Aye, aye, Captain.
Okay, we are adjourned.